Back in high school in 2002, I recorded this movie on a VCR and watched the street racing scenes over and over again, feeling as if I were rewinding time back to the 1980s, a world where roaring engines, pounding synth music, and gleaming muscle cars were still the speed-fueled dream of an entire generation. Every time I hit rewind, I wasn't just watching the film. I was living inside it, inhabiting an era when action movies didn't need much explanation. They just needed to be cool, fast, and reckless. But as I grew older and revisited it more carefully, I began to realize what makes the Wraith cling to memory isn't just nostalgia or the desert car chases. Beneath that glossy exterior lies a behind-the-scenes story that was chaotic, dangerous, and at times even more intense than what made it onto the screen. Did you know that a cameraman was killed during the filming of the racing sequences, and that the crew referred to the very cars they drove as death traps? Or that the film's distinctive synth-heavy score was created using an extremely rare digital instrument, one that almost never existed outside the biggest recording studios of the era, and that one of the movie's most iconic lines was completely improvised on set. And this is where things get truly interesting. 15 behind-the-scenes facts about the Wraith that are even wilder, more dangerous, and more intensely 1980s than anything that appears on screen. 20. Johnny Depp was present with the film crew. Sounds hard to believe, right? But I'm really not making this up. At the time the Wraith was being filmed, 1985, Johnny Depp was dating Sherilyn Fenn, often mistakenly referred to as Sherilyn the actress who played Kerry Johnson. This was a very early stage in Depp's career before 21 Jump Street and before he became an A-list star. Several interviews and behind-the-scenes recollections indicate that Depp frequently appeared on the Arizona set to be with Fenn, and even stayed at the same hotel as the film crew. Interestingly, Depp was at one point considered for the lead role of Jacob, the film's central avenging ghost character. However, the producers ultimately chose Charlie Sheen, who at the time had stronger box office appeal following Platoon and Red Dawn. This decision has been confirmed in later production documents and crew interviews. Although he never appeared on screen, Depp's presence became a small piece of Hollywood behind-the-scenes trivia. And if Johnny Depp had actually taken part in the film The Wraith, might today be remembered as one of his very first cinematic roles. 19. A fatal accident and cars that were death traps. The scenes of cars tearing through the night, engines roaring, and collisions at high speed make The Wraith look like a pure, rebellious 1980s street racing movie. But few people know that from the very first days of shooting, those scenes claimed a real-life death. On the film's second day of production, cinematographer Bruce Ingram was killed when a camera car lost control during a stunt rehearsal. The accident not only killed Ingram on the spot, but also seriously injured several other crew members, including one who suffered permanent damage. The incident is documented in production accident reports and later interviews with the film's crew. The tragedy forced director Mike Marvin to cut or scale back many of the chase sequences that had been planned in the script, both for safety reasons and because the budget could no longer support further risk. Actor David Sherrill, who played Skank, bluntly described the vehicles as death traps, admitting that no one on the crew ever truly felt safe whenever they got behind the wheel. 18. The Interceptor was a real $1 million concept car.
Car heading northbound on Dragonfire Crossing. Have you got that roadblock set up? We're coming in at you at about 100 miles an hour.
Oh, roger that, Murphy. Halifax has 3 units just over the bridge. Let's run him right into it.
Do you remember that moment? The scene where the black car rises up roaring as it charges straight into a life or death race across the desert is what burned the Wraith into viewers' memories. And what makes that scene so effective isn't just the cinematography or the neon lighting, it's the car itself. The sleek black car that steals every glance in the Wraith, known as the Dodge M4S Turbo Interceptor, was not a typical movie prop. It was a fully functional concept car developed by Dodge in collaboration with PPG Industries to serve as a pace car for independent racing events in the early 1980s. With a mid-engine layout, a twin-turbocharged 2.2-litre engine and a top speed of nearly 194 miles per hour, the M4S was a technological beast for its time. Its total development cost exceeded $1 million, making it one of the most expensive vehicles ever to appear in a low-budget film of the 1980s. During filming, Dodge only allowed the real car to be used for static shots and close-ups. The high-speed chases and crashes were performed with fiberglass replicas, most of which were completely destroyed. The real M4S survived, was returned to Dodge after production wrapped, and was later displayed at the Walter P. Chrysler Museum. 17. The heavy synth score was created using a rare instrument. The moment the ghost car tears across the desert to a surge of pounding synth, sounding like an electronic heartbeat echoing through the night, is when the Wraith truly finds its voice. The music doesn't merely sit in the background, it drives the entire emotional experience of the film. Instead of relying entirely on rock or metal like many 1980s action movies, the Wraith took a bolder path: pure electronic synth. Composer Michael Hoenig, working in collaboration with J. Peter Robinson, crafted a score that is both cold and adrenaline-charged. According to production materials and interviews from the period they used the Ned Synclavier, to an extremely rare and expensive digital synthesis system in the mid-1980s, typically found only in major recording studios or well-funded film productions. The Synclavier made it possible to create sounds unlike those of any analog instrument, dense, sharp, and distinctly inhuman. Perfectly suited to a story about a supernatural entity cloaked in the form of a machine of speed. When this layer of synth music is combined with the hard rock tracks scattered throughout the film, the Wraith achieves a sonic identity that is both a product of its era and ahead of its time. 16. The line, "Whoever he is, he's weird and pissed off," was improvised.
You're pissing me off. Get in. Holy shit, it's that kid!
One of the most memorable lines in The Wraith is spoken by Skank when he nervously mutters, "Whoever he is, he's weird and pissed off." What may surprise many viewers is that this line was not in the original script. Actor David Sherrill came up with the line on the spot during filming. He felt the scene was extremely tense and wanted to inject a bit of instinctive humour, a very real-life reaction from someone who is genuinely terrified. Director Mike Marvin immediately recognised how effective it was and decided to keep it in the final cut. That line perfectly captures the spirit of the film, threatening strange and tinged with a distinctly 1980s sense of irony. Many viewers and critics later noted that it carries a strong John Carpenter flavour, where fear is always accompanied by dark humour. 15. A nearby film set accidentally ruined a take. While filming one of the Wraith's major street racing sequences, the crew suddenly heard a loud action call over their walkie-talkies. The problem was that it didn't come from their own set. It turned out that the comedy Three Amigos was being filmed in Arizona at the same time, and their radio signal accidentally overlapped with the Wraith's frequency. The unexpected call threw everyone into confusion. Actors missed their cues, and the take was completely ruined. Cars launched too early adrift hit the wrong mark, and hours of preparation were wasted. The incident became one of the strangest behind-the-scenes stories associated with the film, especially given how completely opposite the tones of the two movies were. Even so, the crew laughed it off and successfully reshot the scene, later turning an annoying mistake into a fun piece of trivia. 14. The villains drove real muscle cars and destroyed them for real. The opening scenes filled with the roar of engines and headlights tearing through the desert night are the moment you realise that the Wraith is not pretending when it comes to speed. Packard Walsh's gang races forward, skids, crashes and explodes, and most of what you see on screen is real. Packard Walsh's gang did not use hollow props. They drove real muscle cars purchased specifically to be smashed in front of the camera. The lineup included a 1967 Chevy Corvette, a 1966 Plymouth Barracuda, a 1977 Pontiac Firebird, a Dodge Daytona Turbo Z, and even an old Chevy pickup truck. According to production records and crew accounts, these were fully functional vehicles, not fiberglass shells. The chase and crash scenes were filmed practically with minimal editing, meaning every collision meant a car was effectively finished. Much of the damage was not scripted. It happened during filming and was kept because it looked too authentic to discard. The cost was the destruction of several classic cars. In return, the Wraith gained a raw, gasoline-soaked action style that perfectly embodied the spirit of 1980s car movies. 13. Rughead's crazy hair was a tribute to David Lynch. From his very first appearance in the gang's nighttime hangouts when neon lights wash over his warped face and his hair stands puffed up as if electrified, Rughead looks like a creature from another world. The character, played by Clint Howard, is instantly recognizable because of this bizarre hairstyle which seems to belong to no familiar aesthetic logic of racing or conventional action films. This was not a random choice. Director Mike Marvin later confirmed that Rughead's look was a direct nod to David Lynch's Eraserhead 1977. Marvin wanted Rughead to feel unsettling, out of sync with reality, a man who always seems to be living in a state of nervous tension. As a result, Clint Howard was asked to style his hair so that it looked deliberately wrong, wild, uncomfortable, and impossible to ignore. 12. Clint Howard's Rughead was originally meant to die. In the first version of the script, Rughead, the stuttering mechanic with the wild hair, was scheduled to meet the same fate as the rest of Packard's gang burned alive by the Wraith. However, during production, director Mike Marvin changed his mind. Clint Howard brought a kind of awkward but sympathetic quality to the character, to the point that Marvin felt killing Rughead would disrupt the film's emotional balance. Instead of sharing his gang's fate, Rughead became the only one to survive the purge, fleeing in terror, but staying alive. This decision inadvertently clarified the Wraith's rules. He does not kill indiscriminately, but punishes selectively. Howard later joked that he was grateful for the change, since most of his roles usually end very early. Rughead's survival leaves an odd aftertaste, as if the story remains unfinished, and that is precisely why audiences remember the character long after the film ends. 11. The influences behind the Wraith. Do you remember the scene where Jacob silently emerges from the desert like a Western gunslinger, a motorcycle replacing the horse, eyes cold like a debt collector? From that very moment, the Wraith confesses what it really is, not just a car movie, but a Western disguised as sci-fi. In an interview with Dread Central director Mike Marvin, stated outright that he was influenced by High Plains Drifter and Shane, and he agreed with the observation that the film's structure is that of a Western car action movie. That's why the film follows classic Western beats. The stranger arrives, the villains are punished one by one, and the ending even includes a moment that echoes the iconic comeback from Shane. As for the darker tone and sense of unease, Marvin also admitted that he borrowed a famous line from John Carpenter's The Thing, simply because of how much he loved that film. 10. An almost unbelievable shooting schedule. Looking at the sun-scorched car chases across the desert, it's easy to assume the Wraith was filmed under harsh conditions for months on end. In reality, the opposite is true. Most of the film was shot in Arizona during the winter, and the entire production lasted just 27 days. An extremely short time for a movie packed with car chases, real crashes, and practical effects. According to production records and crew accounts, the schedule was severely compressed due to budget limitations and the pressure following the on-set accident. Director Mike Marvin was forced to shoot quickly, rely heavily on natural light and minimize retakes. Many action sequences were executed almost one and done with no real chance to reshoot if something went wrong, which helps explain why the film feels raw rushed yet strikingly authentic. 9. The deaths in the Wraith use chilling symbolism. Do you remember the moment after each fatal race when the burning car comes to a stop and the victim steps out physically intact but with their eyes completely burned black? It is one of the most haunting images in the Wraith, and it is far from accidental. Director and screenwriter Mike Marvin explained in interviews and in the DVD commentary that the Wraith's revenge is not simple violence but a supernatural act of judgment. The burned eyes symbolize the last thing the victims ever see, the blinding flash of the Wraith's power, a moment of belated awareness of their own guilt. The body remains whole, but sight itself is erased. This detail also carries another layer of meaning. After each death, one of the metal braces on the Wraith's suit is released, as documented in costume design notes and behind-the-scenes materials. Marvin confirmed that this serves as a visual metaphor for the character gradually reclaiming his humanity, with each act of punishment removing one supernatural restraint. 8. The film's cool villain went on to make one of the most famous romantic films in history. In The Wraith, Nick Cassavetes plays Packard Walsh, the leader of the street racing gang and the film's main antagonist. Packard is not the kind of villain who talks a lot or relies on elaborate schemes. He is simply a dangerous bully stealing cars, terrorizing others, and using brute force whenever he wants something. On screen, Packard embodies a raw, ruthless menace perfectly in line with 1980s action cinema. And then comes the twist that many people still find hard to believe. Years later, that same Nick Cassavetes, the violent, intimidating villain, went on to direct The Notebook, one of the most famous and openly sentimental romantic films of all time. Yes, that The Notebook. 7. The film was released in the same year as two other car-driven action movies. 1986 was a time when Hollywood was obsessed with speed, when cars, asphalt, and violent chases almost became a subgenre of their own. In that year, there were 3 films that put vehicles and action front and centre. The other 2 were Stephen King's Maximum Overdrive and The Hitcher. All 3 films feature impressive racing scenes, chases, and dangerous stunts. And all 3 revolve around a young male protagonist who must confront a terrifying evil force. In each case, the character becomes far more badass in the process. So if you were around in 1986 and loved cars, chances are that at some point that year you watched The Wraith Maximum Overdrive or The Hitcher. 6. The Wraith may be a remake. Over the years, many people have noticed that The Wraith bears a striking resemblance to the 1973 made-for-television film The California Kid. That film also tells the story of a driver who returns to seek revenge after being involved in an accident caused by a psychopathic road menace, unleashing a chain of action and chaos on the highways. Both works centre on a deeply personal revenge narrative closely tied to speed, asphalt, and vigilante justice. And like The Wraith, the film also features a gruff older sheriff. If you're still not convinced there's a strong connection between the two films, remember that The California Kid stars Martin Sheen, the real-life father of Charlie Sheen. Yes, both movies feature a Sheen. So what do you think? A remake or just a coincidence? 5. The director of The Wraith once feared the film would never be completed. Director Mike Marvin has admitted in many interviews that after the serious on-set accident and a series of budget cuts, he truly believed The Wraith might be abandoned midway through production. Funding was steadily running out. Many scenes were forced to be dropped and the production schedule was shortened to an alarming degree. Marvin had to rewrite the script almost every day just to keep the film breathing. Even when filming was finally completed, the anxiety did not end. Marvin feared the studio would shelve The Wraith and never release it. When Orion decided to put the film out, he still believed it would quickly disappear without a trace. But the opposite happened. Repeated airings on HBO turned The Wraith into a genuine cult film. Looking back, Marvin has said that it was precisely this chaos and instability that made the movie's underdog success feel all the sweeter. 4. The promotional posters for The Wraith. Before the era of YouTube trailers or social media posters were the film's public face, The Wraith had two main posters. My favourite is the illustrated one showing the Wraith in his black suit and helmet, which gives off a mysterious science fiction vibe and looks genuinely cool. I've always felt it carries a hint of Back to the Future, while also making the film resemble a superhero movie, which, to be fair, the Wraith essentially is a revenge hero. The more commonly used poster tells a very different story. It shows a group of teenagers clustered in the upper right corner, looking shocked as if they're about to be swept into a teen adventure. At a glance, it feels reminiscent of the Goonies, but the problem is, it doesn't make much sense. Why is Packard Walsh the main villain standing in the same frame with the heroes? It feels like looking at a RoboCop poster where Murphy and Clarence Bodicker are casually hanging out together. Not to mention the detail of the mysterious glow at the end of the road, a motif so overused in 1980s posters that it became dull. Honestly, when you already have an insanely cool turbo car and a black-clad avenging warrior, you might as well show them off. 3. Critics initially hated the film. Few people realise that when The Wraith was released in theatres in 1986, critics harshly criticised it. Reviews dismissed the film as a nonsensical ghost car cartoon and complained that the plot was confusing. Leonard Maltin even brushed it off as a movie only for people who like fast cars and loud noise, while other critics mocked its cheesy dialogue and low budget. However, audiences and critics have always been two magnets pulling in opposite directions. Viewers who discovered the film through cable television and VHS, on the other hand, loved its mix of supernatural revenge, neon aesthetics and wild car stunts. Over time, the movie transformed from a critical failure into a cult classic with a loyal fan base. Today, its 33% score on Rotten Tomatoes is almost meaningless. Fans cherish the film for exactly the reasons critics once hated it. 2. The film failed at the box office. The fact that The Wraith gradually faded into obscurity can be traced back to its release in November 1986. The film failed to even recoup $1 million against a budget of roughly $3 million, and it was quickly labelled a commercial failure. Things only worsened when critics almost completely turned their backs on it at a time when they were already growing tired of Mad Max-style science fiction mixed with car-based revenge stories. The film was also at a disadvantage because it was released at the same time as An American Tail and Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. And yes, an animated movie about a singing immigrant mouse along with Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock saving whales easily outperformed The Wraith at the box office. To this day, the film sits at around 33% on Rotten Tomatoes. 1. An entire psychic witch subplot was cut. One of the strangest cuts from The Wraith was an entire storyline centered on a psychic witch living out on the prairie. In early script drafts, Sheriff Loomis was supposed to visit this mysterious woman to learn more about the Wraith's supernatural powers and its connection to Jake. These scenes would have added a darker, mystical layer to the story, expanding the Wraith's origin and pushing the revenge theme further into the surreal. Actress Dick Butkus, who was slated to appear in this subplot, had all of her scenes removed when the production ran out of time and money following the serious on-set accident. Without these sequences, the film shifted to a faster pace and a stronger focus on action, leaving the Wraith's powers largely unexplained. Fans still debate whether the missing scenes would have made the film scarier or simply slowed it down, but their removal ultimately contributed to the movie's mysterious, unfinished feeling. So what about you? Which moment from The Wraith 1986 do you remember most? Leave a comment, and if you want to continue unlocking other deleted scenes from Hollywood's golden age, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. You will be surprised by what Hollywood has kept hidden from you for decades.